Hey gang, I am Joe Edelman and welcome to the Last Frame Live, the longest running weekly photography live stream on YouTube. You know the drill. If you're watching live, please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you're watching from. And hey, if you're watching the replay, no sweat, you're still a part of the show. Drop a comment below the video so that I know you were here. Let's see, already tonight we've got Elaine here from New York, Lynn from New York, Nick down in Maryland, I got Alvin in Virginia, Jeff's here in Maryland too. Awesome. So look, I got a lot of stuff tonight, and I'm also going to tell you that I'm not as prepared as I wanted to be because I've made some changes. You're going to see the changes as they happen. And some of it took me a little longer, but I have a lot of cool things I want to share with you and talk to you about. So hopefully I'll be able to pull this off without too much of a hitch. But in photo news, let's start there. It's where we always start. There's a lot of stuff that went on this week, a lot. But before I dive in, I want to address an email that I received from a viewer who shall remain unnamed. This viewer was upset that I do the photo news section pretty much every week, and there's not always something to talk about every week, but I do it every week. And I mention new gear that comes out, but I never actually review it or list all of the specs, just some of them. Well, that is actually absolutely correct. I rarely review gear, and I only list the top level specs on new releases that people might care about. Look, in all fairness, number one, there are a lot of really great gear reviewers on the internet. Honestly, one of the first places that I would encourage you guys, now that they've switched over, if you're looking for gear reviews that are, pretty even keel, I think they do a good job. It's the two guys that are now with Petapixel. I used to be with DP Review. I would encourage you to go with them, unless you like big hair or gray hair. You can go check those people out, right? But here's the thing. I mention this gear and I talk about some of the new features for honestly a very simple reason. It's to create awareness for all of you. Knowing about the advancements in gear and software in our industry, honestly, it's essential if you want to keep doing this photography stuff, and especially if you're hoping to keep improving, and especially if you want to make money. Now, is it important, though, to know every little detail of every release, or for that matter, even to go out and buy every new upgrade? Only when it's an iPhone. I'm kidding. Well, sort of kidding. I pre-ordered mine. But look, I'm not a gear junkie, and I don't teach photography that way about the gear, but I am very aware that our world and our industry is constantly evolving. I mean, the technology that we have available to us as photographers today in 2023, it's amazing. And I really do feel that it's essential to stay on top of what's happening and really, more importantly, to be aware of the changes, right? You've heard me talk a lot about AI and those kinds of things, and the idea that you don't have to dive in and use it and know everything about it right now, but don't ignore it, right? Don't put your head in the sand and pretend that it's not there. If you want to remain relevant, you need to pay attention to the changes. Don't be a dinosaur, right? So, as expected, Panasonic released, in fact, I apologize, let me just switch my screen around here. Panasonic released or announced their new Lumix G9 II, which Panasonic users, Micro Four Thirds Panasonic users, they are pretty excited about this thing, right? It's the long-awaited Micro Four Thirds camera in the G series, and it's the first to feature phase detect autofocus technology, which Lumix users have been after for a really long time. Top level specs, 25.2 megapixel live MOS image sensor. It's definitely got a more powerful processor, swift hybrid autofocus system, now with subject recognition technology, and burst shooting at up to 60 frames per second. The hybrid autofocus system includes subject recognition technology that's powered by AI. The G9 II, its AI-based subject detection system, now recognizes, in addition to people, of course, and it also did some animals before, cars, motorcycles, and animal eyes. Alongside these new subjects, it also claims that the G9 II offers faster and more accurate human and animal recognition than it did before. The G9 II includes 315 contrast detect autofocus points that are organized across a 21 by 15 grid and 779 of those luxurious phase detection autofocus points in a 41 by 19 arrangement. The autofocus area covers nearly all of the image area in the viewfinder. The Panasonic Lumix G9 II, it will be available at all of your authorized retailers beginning in early November for $1,900. In possibly what is the week's most important news, Apple continues, whoops, let's try that again there. There's one of my little hitches for the evening. How's that? There we go. Apple continues to create incredible digital cameras that are also capable of making phone calls and surfing the internet. I mean, come on. I don't see Canon and Nikon offering options like that at all, right? So obviously yesterday, Apple had their keynote. And again, awareness, because this is not like a revolutionary new iPhone. And my iPhone, I haven't upgraded in 2 years. I'm at that point, as some of the iPhones have done, where my battery, I can't get my battery up to a full charge. I was going to try and hold out another year, but this phone's pretty impressive. So I pulled the trigger today. I did my pre-order. The orders go in Friday. But they've basically got 3 versions, right? There is the Max, the Pro, and then, of course, the basic, the iPhone 15. But just to give you some details and specs on the cameras, and of course the early images that Apple's releasing, which they always look amazing, but they still continue to look more amazing every time they do this. We're up to 48 megapixels with main ultra-wide telephoto lenses, super high resolution photos at 24 megapixels and 48. Next generation, meaning upgraded portraits with the focus and depth control. Really pretty cool. And then the optical zoom options. Let's see, for video, let me scroll down here and find where the video details are, because they've upgraded stuff there too. And so for me, I ordered the Pro. The Pro Max is the bigger one. Let's see, where are the big changes here? Smart HDR, next gen, video recording. There it is. Gosh. 4K video, 24 frames, 25 frames, 30 frames, or 60 frames per second. 1080p, recording at 25, 30, or 60. You can do the cinematic mode for videos with shallow depth of field. There's the action mode. They've got the log video recording. A lot of cool stuff in these, but I will tell, and I mean, it's not a camera thing, but it's a phone thing. USB-C cables with the newer Bluetooth technology. These phones now have hard drives as large as 1 terabyte, which basically means that in a pinch, you could do a shoot in a camera, even like the Sony a7R IV-A that I use, download that entire shoot onto the phone for backup storage, and then download it to a computer later. So, if you're in remote locations, in tough locations to work in, definitely some really, really cool stuff. And of course, we can only imagine there are going to be lots of new apps and things that are going to really expand on the capabilities of that, even for Sony users. Sony's got a cool new app now that will turn your phone into a video monitor. So a lot of stuff coming down the pike now with all these upgrades that are happening. So also, one more piece of news too worth pointing out. Olympus, or excuse me, OM System, they've announced the TG7, which is an upgrade to the Olympus TG6, which they actually discontinued that camera last month. Awesome little camera. It is the only Olympus camera that I still own, the TG6. Like its predecessors, the TG5 and the TG6, the OM System TG7 has the 12 megapixel sensor paired to the same lens. It's the 45 to 18 millimeter f2 to 4.9. So full frame, that's equivalent of like 25 to 100 millimeter in full frame, or 35 millimeter equivalent. TG7 waterproof down to 50 feet. In fact, here I think let me hit one more. There we go. I've got some of these specs for you. It's waterproof down to 15 feet. For those of you in Europe, elsewhere in the world, all the meters are on there. Waterproof down to 50 feet, shockproof to 7 feet, crush-proof, 220 pounds of force, freeze-proof to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, dust-proof rated at IPX8, and waterproof at IPX6. All really pretty impressive numbers. Minimum focusing distance of 0.394 inches in the Microsoft mode. It will shoot 4K, 30p, and full HD videos up to 120 frames per second. If you go to lower resolutions, you can do 240 frames per second in standard HD, and then 480 frames per second in SD resolution. Pretty cool. Also, it has the famous live composite mode, which is exclusive to Olympus and OM System cameras. So if you know it, you know it. You've seen me talk about it in the past. I've done a lot of shots with it. The OM System Tough TG7 will be available later this month for $550. Honestly, it's a great price. And it will be available in both black and red colors. I think it will be interesting to see ultimately for Olympus how this camera sells, as we're coming out at the same time with major upgrades for the iPhone, etc. And look, before anybody jumps, I get it. Part of the title, tough, right? The iPhone cannot handle a lot of the scenarios that the TG7 can, and for that reason, the TG7 is a great camera. But the reality of it is, the audience is becoming smaller and smaller. So I just bring that up because my hope is that photographers will see the value of having a camera like that fits in your pocket, super durable, can be used in almost any situation. It's not going to be a primary camera, but it is an awesome backup and auxiliary camera for special situations to work in. Okay, and no, I'm not sponsored by Olympus. They did not pay me to say any of those things, whatever, okay? I'm just a big fan of that particular camera. All right, so a quick education update. Let's change gears here for you. Couple of things. September 28th. In fact, let me get that on my screen here, and I will share that screen. I'm going to do that one manually. See, I told you I was going to run into at least one or two little things go crazy here tonight. September 28th, 1 p.m. in the afternoon, Eastern Time, US. I'll be doing a presentation online all about abstract photography, which is something that you don't get to see a lot of my abstract work, but I actually shoot quite a bit. This is being sponsored by Tamron and also Murphy's Camera in Kentucky. It's a free program, 90 minutes. Registration is required. The link is in the description below the video. Also, it was great to see a lot of you last night at my presentation on creative color and using gels. Similar format. Next month, let's go ahead and hit that one right there. I'll be doing beautiful portraits, the psychology and techniques behind shooting beauty, October 10th. So this is also a virtual presentation online. $15 is the fee to attend. It's a 2-hour program, usually goes to about 2.5 hours. Also includes a download that's kind of like a little ebook with a whole ton of information that is part of the presentation, but templates, emails, prep lists, things like that that you can go out and replicate and use for your own photography after that. And then last but not least, while we're talking about education, let me get that on the screen here. I was talking to you about this week, or this last week, excuse me, the webinar that I was doing for Skylum and the Luminar Neo software. If you are Neo curious, I would encourage you to check this out. Look, honestly, and again, I say it in the very beginning of this presentation, I'm not sponsored by Skylum. I didn't get paid to do this webinar. I've actually been having a lot of fun with it. In fact, I'm going to show you some stuff as we get into the show tonight. Neo is honestly, it's a really cool creativity tool that, in my opinion, has use for both experienced and very new photographers. So in this presentation, I had the opportunity to show off some of the things that I do with it and some of the cool tools that are in there. The link, it's in the description below the video. It is about a 90-minute program, but you can check it out for free. So if you missed it, I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. Let's move on. We're going to look at our shoot breakdown. That's actually, before I do that, let me remind you, all of you are part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame every week. This is the part where I beg every week. It'd help a lot more people learn about The Last Frame. If you could do me a solid, hit that thumbs up down below the video. The more thumbs up, the more the YouTube algorithm recommends the show to other photographers. Okay? All right. So our shoot breakdown for the week. So this week, I have got an image, and I'm not going to show you a lighting diagram this week because I'm going to try and kind of do you one better. And I'm going to show you a whole bunch of kind of different pictures that I shot with the new Tamron 70-180 f2.8 G2. And yes, I left out some of the letters there because there's all kinds of letters. So this lens isn't on the street yet. It was announced a couple of weeks ago. In fact, let me go ahead and put the spec sheet up here, and we'll start with that. Okay, so this is the 70-180 f2.8. As they say with Tamron, the G2 second generation. It has the vibration compensation. They've redesigned the optical arrangement inside. Super fast autofocus, that's been improved. This one also has the ability to do the firmware upgrades, which the other two lenses in the Tamron Trio can do that. In fact, let me go ahead and switch over to the Keynote here. There we go. So this was the copy that I actually got to play with. Tamron sent this to me. Again, I'm not sponsored by Tamron. I did not get paid to do this. I didn't get to keep a lens. It went out back to Dallas, Texas via FedEx on Monday morning, so I no longer have it, but I'm seriously considering the upgrade for a couple of reasons, and I'll explain that. So they sent me the lens and basically, just asked, hey, like, go use it, try it out. One of the things that I very much like about it, it's got the ability to do the firmware upgrades so that as the camera electronics change, and that Tamron's also able to make upgrades to the lens. And you've got the custom settings with the lock, which you can program. So you get a lot more, versatility with it. Also, the first thing that I noticed when I took the lens out of the box, which I really like, the ergonomics are a little bit different because of the USB-C port and the electronic upgrades. The neck of the lens, it's a little bit deeper than the original. What that does is it gives me a perfect place for the base of my palm to kind of sit at the back of the lens, because this lens is not a super long 70-200, right? It's really fairly compact. So I very much liked the form factor on this, and it's very noticeably different. overall, the lens is basically the same size. I think that Tamron does say that there's some slight differences in size between the two, but generally speaking, it's basically the same size, same format. They're both 2.8 lenses. Um, Also, I decided when I was going to shoot with this. So I did one studio shoot. I'm going to show you that picture last. That's the cover shot, because that's also a good segue into some of the stuff with Luminar Neo. But I decided, since I almost never shoot a lot of stuff at f2.8 and go for the bokeh, I decided, since this is a brand new lens, my approach to using this lens was going to be to go out and shoot a whole bunch of stuff wide open. So not everything is wide open. The images that I'm going to show you, I have the settings on all of them so that you can see them. But I wanted to do a lot of stuff at 2.8 just to see, number one, how sharp was the lens going to look? What was the bokeh going to be like? Just to really get kind of an overall feel of what could I do with this lens. So that's the trio, the 17 to 28, the 28 to 75, and then the new 70 to 180. And by the way, still with the older 70 to 180, but that would be the setup that I work with for my main lens sets. I only own one prime lens, and it's a Samyang super wide, cheapy lens. That's it. Everything is zooms. Makes life really, really easy. Okay. So first thing I did with this lens is I went out to a county fair that happens the end of August every year here. This guy was a stilt walker dude. And by the way, you're going to notice I purposely throw in, ISO all over the place, shutter speeds all over the place. For the most part, you'll see a couple shots that aren't wide open, but this one, ISO 2500, this was actually, it was getting pretty dark when I did this. This guy was a stilt walker. He was so tall, he was actually posing for a picture with two other people. They're standing under him. But I wanted to, get a sense of, okay, it's heavily backlit. The sun's just setting behind that building. So by opening it up and cranking the ISO, I wanted to see how it was going to handle any kind of flare, anything like that. Performed super, super well. Here's one of the few shots that I did very stopped down. This is at f16 to get the little starburst coming out from behind the building. Swing going by. So this is ISO 100, shutter speed of 1250. Okay. All of these images, by the way, were shot on the A7R4A. This was a 5-second exposure, ISO 50, f22 of this ride, as it was called the Tesla, as it was starting up, sunset in the background. This was actually one of my favorite shots from the county fair. And again, all of these are done with the 70 to 180, which the fun part of the challenge for me also, which this is a suggestion for all of you to try out from time to time. Normally, if I were going to go to a place like this county fair and I want to shoot images, my go-to lens would be that 17 to 28, right? Wide, really wide, and get close. That's just kind of the way that I've always shot things like that since back in my newspaper days. So it was actually a really interesting challenge. And you've seen me show images before from fairs of these rides and that, all done with super wide angle lenses. So it was quite a challenge to go in with a 70 to 180 and just take a completely different perspective and looking for things that were really interesting with the rides. And the big challenge with this particular one was I found out on my first test shot that there was a point, or actually it was a series of test shots. There was a point where if I shot the ride while it was fairly low before it started to go up, I could get all the craziness going on and still get the name. If I waited any longer, the name was kind of obliterated and you saw parts of the lettering. So that then became the challenge, was getting it at just the right time. And if I also timed it right, I could catch it right as it was going from green to blue. So I still got a little bit of green, which you can see in the bottom of the frame, but mostly getting the blue and, kind of the purple feel to it. My youngest grandson, first day kindergarten. This is a shot with one of their two burner dogs. This is at ISO 800, 640 f2.8. I'm going to show you actually how I did it, but that sun flare that you see in the background, that is added in Luminar Neo. Everything else is exactly as it was shot, but that sun flare was added in Neo. At the same time, just clowning around with him, having some fun. Again, shooting at 2.8. As I said, I don't do a lot of bokeh, but I like the texture and the feel of the bokeh that this has in the background. A little bit faster ISO, faster shutter speed here because I was also doing some shots of him swinging. But then I also went completely in the opposite direction. 1/80th of a second. You don't have to go super slow for something like this, but you do have to practice your timing. ISO 100 f2.8 and kind of doing the pan as he's swinging back and forth to get the blurry background. Nice simple portrait of the dog. Awesome detail. Again, great bokeh in the background. Overall, very, very happy with it. I shot an NCAA football game last weekend. Took this along with me. I was using the longer lens, the 200 to 600 that I have also, but shot some of the game with the Tamron. Again, had a lot of fun with it. This particular shot I really liked. The key to this shot, if you haven't noticed, it's not the guy carrying the football. It's the guy that's losing the helmet down there. But it actually performed very well. Very pleased with it there. My older grandson, the baseball kid, did some shots of him in the dugout. In fact, he's at tryouts right now for his travel team for next year. So we'll hope that he does well tonight. So again, just all portraits, stuff of him in the dugout, various shutter speeds, various ISOs. Really great lens. It's been, gosh, almost 2 years now that I've been using Tamron lenses primarily as my go-to lenses. Super happy with them. 6-year warranty, you can't beat. The optics are outstanding. For all of you Sony users, keep in mind that Sony owns about 12% of Tamron. And for all of you Canon, Nikon, Sony, Tamron owns the patents for the lens coatings on the front of most of the lenses that are made. Tamron also makes some of the Nikon lenses that you buy with a Nikon logo on them. So great stuff, right? Super, super close focusing. These are some kind of, almost macro type abstract shots. All of these were done at 70 millimeter, right? It gets down to about 7.5 inches, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, at 70 millimeter on the lens, which, it's like having a macro lens. Absolutely awesome. All of these were handheld. I didn't spend a lot of time in the focusing. I just really wanted to see, how is this thing going to handle? What kind of depth? In this case, what kind of depth of field is it going to give me, doing the close-ups? And then we're at our cover shot for the night. The cover shot, ISO 100, 2/50th a second, f8. Hopefully you get bored hearing those settings because the majority of my studio stuff comes in at those settings, right? So I did do something a little bit different. Oh, and by the way, lighting, since I don't have the lighting diagrams, this is done with the 33-inch Photox Ronnie on camera left, okay? She's looking up towards it. Just that one light is about 3 feet in front of her, and then there is one light behind her on a gray background, just keeping it kind of a soft light gray, not quite a middle tone, but just a tad lighter than a middle tone. All that color that you're seeing, kind of that flare, that was added in post using Luminar Neo, and it's super fast. I know a lot of you kind of think, but that kind of stuff's really advanced and it's really challenging and it's difficult. Actually, in Luminar Neo, it's not at all, okay? In fact, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over to my second display here. So this is the interface inside Luminar Neo. And I'm just going to show you this really quick, and I'll show you how I put the flare in that image of my grandson, okay? In fact, you know what? Now that I said that, let me just grab really quick for you. Let me grab the cover shot from tonight. I should have grabbed that in the first place. So let's just do that. And it may be in here. I want to do kind of one that's already processed. There we go. So obviously this already has, this is the finished version. It's already got the flare on it, but I want to show you how easy it is because we're going to go ahead and we're going to add to the flare. So when you get into Luminar Neo, one of the first things you see is all the preset options. So for those of you that are really new to photography and are just getting started and you're really not sure about all of this post-processing stuff, this is a great place to start. But do me a favor, please. Whatever presets you choose, open them up and adjust them a little bit and experiment with them and play with them so that you make it your own, so that you don't make your pictures look like cheap copies of something everybody else is doing. So when I use Neo, I go to the Edit tab that you see up here in the center. I'll enlarge that so you can see that there. We click on that, and here are all of the various tools. I keep them all expanded. If we double click on them, you know, we can kind of close them, and you've got these categories, right? There are layer properties and a crop tool. Then I have two things in my favorites because they're the two that I would use anytime I'm developing a picture. That's going to be the develop and the enhance tools. The enhance, you'll notice, is an AI tool. It's kind of neat. And then there's a section for extensions, essentials, creative, portraits, and professional, right? So I like to keep them completely open because I use Neo as a tool that is going to inspire me creatively. It's kind of like a creative sandbox, literally, right? With Photoshop, I'm skilled. I know what I'm doing. If I have an idea, I can get from point A to point B and I can create that idea. But a lot of times in Neo, I just want to see what can I do. So Neo now has layers, but if we click on the layer box over here on the right-hand side, we get these flares and light leaks, of which there's like a whole bunch, okay? And there's sparkles and stardust, and you can, of course, also add your own, right? But the way that I created this image is very simple. I just want to show you how easy it is. We'll go ahead and we're going to add some orange into it. So I'm going to click this one that's got the orange, and you'll notice it laid over top. So if I, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. Now, in this case, it managed not to hit her face at all. So that's easy. We're just going to leave that there. Let's put another one on. Let's see what else we get. So if I do this one, now that one is on top of her face, right? So let's go ahead and, I'm just going to zero that out. See, so you can see when that comes in, it comes in over her face. Notice all these are coming in as I do them at 50% opacity. So it's kind of usable right out of the box. But here's the thing. I don't want her face to be that washed out. I kind of like what the color did, but I don't want her face to be that washed out. Here's how simple it is. Click on masking over here on the right. And I'm just going to do brush. And I'm going to make the brush pretty big. And I'm going to bring the strength down to around 60 or so. Again, experiment. There's no right number, right? So now that I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint her face out of that mask. Okay? So let's go back to the properties. If I turn it off, turn it back on. In fact, here, I can do it this way and come over here and I can hide it. There we go. There it is before. There it is after. I want to take a little bit more out. So let's just clear that up a tad more. Brush, erase. In fact, you know what? I think I had it on paint. That's why I'm not happy with it here. There we go. That's what I want. I want to take that out. Perfect. And now I've got the color. And I can go back through then. If I decide, you know what, I don't like that one as much, I can go ahead and hide that. I can leave that on and so forth. So it's just amazingly easy to work with. So the image of my grandson that we started with, let's see here. Now I just got to figure out where that one went to. And now, okay, there it is. It's going to come back. There we go. All right. So I'm not going to do the whole processing because I don't want to make this a whole Luminar Neo demo, but I want to show you how cool it is to be able to put the flare in, right? So if we scroll on down here, there is a creative tool called sun rays. Real simple, right? So I'm going to go ahead and grab the dot. I'm going to move it up to that corner. And now I can make it warmer. So it's got a little bit more yellow to it. Okay. I can play with the overall look, the length. We're going to go ahead and make them a little bit longer. We're going to let it penetrate a little bit more. There we go. And then we're going to dial some of these down for the rays. Also, we're going to randomize them a little bit, right? And now we have the image with the sun rays in it. So obviously it's important to make that picture work. It's got to be a backlight image or backlit image, etc. Okay, but it allows you to give it just a little extra something to play with. So food for thought. I do know that Luminar is planning some more webinars, also kind of an introduction to Neo type webinar and stuff like that. I don't know that I'll be involved with them, but I will share information on those as they come up. All right. So I believe we are up to the Q&A, my favorite part of the night. So let's chat. What have you guys been up to? What are you struggling with? How can I help you with your photography? I know I got a couple questions in here, so we're going to start with those, but we're in good shape time-wise. We got 20 minutes, so go ahead, start typing. So question here from Jay. I've been having difficulty getting prints back that reflect the image I view on my monitor. The results often have color variations. Are there any best practices for preparing a file for print? Yeah, Jay, for sure. So if you are going to send stuff out for printing, there's a couple things that I would recommend that you do. Number one, don't skimp on the lab. And I don't mean you have to go to the most expensive lab in the world, because that won't necessarily get you a good print back. But I mean, don't send them to like Walmart, right? Or Shutterfly. Okay, if you're going to get prints made, go to a real lab. I use a lab in Maryland called Nations Photo. You could use somebody like White House Color, Bay Photo out in California, another great one. I mean, California, San Francisco. There's a lot of them, right? Use a good lab. That's step one. Step two is, before we even get to the prepping of the file, go to the website for that lab, and they will have, like in their support section, they will have an FAQ section for how to prep files. And that's not going to give you all the solutions to your problem, but it's important that you know what file formats do they support, what file sizes do they support, what color spaces do they want the files in, right? And if you're really hardcore into getting things exact, the better labs will also allow you to download ICC profiles that you can use to help get your color right. I'll be honest with you, most of the time, for most of you, if you're printing like nice images to go on your wall, that kind of stuff, you actually don't need to go quite that far. But if you want it perfect, you're going to go that far, right? So you want to have that information. Now, let's talk about the computer. First step is you should be color calibrating your computers. I strongly encourage you to invest in a calibration tool. I use the Spider from Datacolor. I've talked about that in quite a few videos in the past. It's just super simple, super easy, but you need to calibrate them. One of the reasons why I like the Spider is that it also measures the ambient light in my room. And when I'm not live streaming with, these big bright lights, my work lights are adjusted to a level that is appropriate for editing and retouching. So it's actually monitoring that, right? So it's important to know that you have got your monitors calibrated, set to the right color space, etc. It's also important when you are working on your files, pay attention to the color space that you are working on your files in. If you are shooting like ProPhoto RGB or Adobe RGB in camera, and then going into Photoshop or Lightroom or Neo or any of those, and not converting the color space before you save your output file, then you are going to shift your color in the process, which by default makes it harder for the labs to give you back good color, right? So it's important. You can work in ProPhoto RGB or you can work in Adobe RGB, but most of the labs are going to want sRGB files. So when you output that file to go to the lab, it is important that you change the color profile in the file before you output it so that it's embedded and built into it. The other thing that I frequently hear from people, Jay, about printing, and this was a problem I dealt with years ago, and the solution was like so insanely simple, but it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about a lot. And that was that I would work on images. I'd be really happy with the way they looked. I was ready to go. And then when I would print them, and I was printing myself at the time, the print that would come out of the printer was ridiculously dark. Drove me nuts for years because it was like completely hit or miss, you know, because then I would go back and I would lighten it a little and lighten some more. And then, you know, I was just wasting paper. I was wasting ink. Finally, somebody pointed out to me why that happened. And it actually is because of my brain and your brain, everybody else's brain. The devices that we work on when we work on our pictures are backlit. The light is coming from behind the image directly at us. When we hold a print in our hands, we are looking at reflected light from the print. And that light is whatever light happens to be in the space where you're looking at the print. But it is not backlit, meaning the print itself, all things equal, will always look darker than the computer. But that's not good enough. We don't want it to look darker, right? So how do we fix that? The solution is actually really simple. You work on your images the way you always work on your images. Nothing changes. Do make sure that you've got the right color profiles in play. Once you've saved your PSD file or whatever format you're working in as a master copy, you are then going to grab a piece of white printer paper, bright white printer paper. And in your editing program, Photoshop, whatever it is, create a white file, a nice big white file, 255, 255, 255, all the way across, right? Or FFFFF if you like hex numbers, but white. Hold the white paper next to the white image on your computer screen. Most of us prefer to do our editing in dimmer lit spaces. The reason we do that, it's our brains, because our brains think those backlit images look nicer and better saturated, because they do. But the fact is that doesn't help you with a print, because that's not how you look at a print. So what you're going to realize when you hold that piece of paper against the computer's going to look white. That piece of paper is going to look like medium gray. It's going to look horrible. So what you have to do is you have to turn the lights on in your room, turn the lights up. You need to get the room bright enough that the white piece of paper in your hand looks the same white as the white file on your computer screen. I promise you, when you do that the first time, you are going to feel like you're standing outside at noon on a bright, sunny day without sunglasses on. You've never had your room that bright to print. But now, when you look at the computer, your picture is also going to start to look darker because now you've brought up the room light in a way that it's overpowering the backlight. So what are you going to do? You're going to lighten your image. And you can simply use the brightness at that point. If you've processed your image properly, use the brightness slider, and you're going to lighten your image until it looks good with all the ambient light. And then save a copy to send off to the printer, and it will come back as bright. Now, there's one other option. Now that I've said all that, depending on the lab that you deal with, and I can't speak for all labs because I don't use all labs, and I'm ashamed to say I don't print nearly as much as I should. I think most of us don't print nearly as much as we should. That's one of the pitfalls of all the digital technology we have. We always have our images with us on electronic devices, and we just don't get around to printing, which is unfortunate. It really is. But depending on the lab, Nation's Photo Lab, as an example, unless they've changed this recently, you have an option when you send a file to them to be printed. You can tell them print it as is. So you only want to do that if you followed all the directions, if you know you're working on a color calibrated monitor, if you've made sure your file's bright enough, and even better yet, if you're using their ICC profiles to check. Or you can let them adjust the file to the way they feel it will look best. So they're not going to go in and kind of rework it and start resaturating and dodging and burning and things like that. But they are, if they feel it's too dark, they're going to lighten it. If they feel it's too bright, they're going to darken it. Obviously, the risk that you run is that the person sitting at the machine may have very different taste than you do and may completely misinterpret your intent with your photograph. So if your image is meant to be really dark and moody, you might want to include a note that says, you know, this should be fairly dark and moody. The brightest part of the image is this, and it should look such and such a way, right? Got to give them some feedback. You don't want to just like toss it over the wall and hope that it comes back good, right? But I would suspect that places like Bay Photo, White House Custom Color, they probably do similar things. MPix is another one. Even Adorama, for you know what I understand, has a pretty decent lab. I know Frono's Photo talks about it all the time. And he does. He has a lot of really nice stuff printed, so they can't be that bad. But I've never worked with them. I don't know, you know, what it's like working with them. So, Jay, I hope I didn't scare you away from printing. I hope that helps. But indeed, work with a better lab and do invest in color management tools and make sure you do it. In fact, my monitors right now are about 5 days past due for being calibrated. I've just been really busy, and that's actually on my agenda tomorrow is to do my monthly calibration. I do mine once a month, and you can set it up. It gives you reminders, right? So you can have it remind you weekly, monthly, every 2 months, whatever you want it to be. Okay. All right. Let's see. We got some stuff here from Charlie. Greetings from Mexico. What are some ways to add value to my digital work? Right now, my packages vary in value by adding more delivered pictures, digital only. Besides prints, is there any other way to add value to my sessions if I'm only delivering digitally? I know you usually talk about growing a business by adding value to your work. Yeah, Charlie. Wow. So number one, excellent question. And I love when we get some business questions. One of the things that will help, so I'm going to start giving you the answer, but I need you to type something for me, Charlie. Okay. Let me know what you're shooting for these sessions. Are we talking portraits? And if so, is it like a business portrait, a modeling headshot, a formal portrait? Tell me what it is you're shooting. So the way that you add value, and it's a great question, because when we hear the word value, we tend to think of like, well, it's a high quality thing, right? And that is part of it. Part of the perceived value of our photography is excellent photography. In fact, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have as photographers today. Why? Because companies like Apple yesterday come out with a phone or a camera that has a 48 megapixel sensor, and it also makes phone calls. The quality keeps getting better and better and better. Now, let me be really clear. all photographers, stop whining that that's cutting into your business. It's not cutting into your business. It's not. But it's important to understand that because of the fact that people can generate pretty good images on their own, the perceived value of a picture is not the same as it used to be. So as an example, Charlie, one of the words that you used a couple of times, I believe, in your messages to me was packages, right? What you want to get away from is the idea of commoditizing a picture or commoditizing a portrait, right? So, good. Charlie's answer here is he's shooting mostly casual sessions, portraits for birthdays, pregnancy shoots, couple shoots, anniversaries, etc. This is perfect. Okay, so right out of the box, the first thing I got to point out to you is one of the reasons why you're having a hard time generating more revenue doing what you're doing is because you're providing digital downloads, right? From a business standpoint, Charlie, that means honestly you're being kind of lazy, right? Listen to what I said when I talked about my own printing. We don't print as much as we should. And we don't. Society, we don't print as much as we should because we can carry thousands of pictures with us in our hands at all time. They're always available, which is cool. But there's just something about a tangible picture that you can hold in your hand, or better yet, look at framed on a wall. People see value in that. People understand that that's worth something. Now, indeed, it's got to be a really great picture for people to want to spend the money to get that big print and put it in a frame. But that's where your markup is, because that big print, it costs you, the photographer, a fraction of what you're going to charge for it. That's where your markup is, right? So you do really need to start to evolve your business model so that you're showing prints. And by the way, selling prints. You don't sell the prints online. So when I say selling prints, I don't mean have a website where people look at the proofs and then they order. No. That's lazy. The way you sell prints is you create an experience and you create stories, right? The way you raise your prices for those sessions, I'm going to explain how to do that in a second, but the way you raise your prices for all of this is think beyond just taking the pictures. So if you're doing, I think you mentioned, pregnancy shoots, maternity sessions, right? Instead of just having the woman come in and taking pictures of her with her belly or maybe her, fiance with her, that kind of stuff, go out and connect with a local hair salon, better yet, a spa, right? By the time a woman is at the point where she's ready to have pregnancy photos done, she's also ready to just be done with all of it, right? Part of it's not fun. Let her go and spend a couple hours at a spa, relax, then get her hair done, then get her makeup done, get her nails done, so that she just feels incredible and she's relaxed. And then she comes to you for the photo session. So what she's really paying for is she's paying for this experience of being able to spoil herself for a couple hours, to relax, to have some fun, and then have an incredible image to remember the whole experience. You're not actually going to have to handle paying for the spa and the salon and that kind of stuff. You're going to build the relationships. In fact, you're going to give them some images that they're going to hang in their businesses with your business cards. You're going to send the person there. They're going to give them a discount because you have that relationship. And then she's going to come to you for the pictures, but you're going to be able to charge more because it's all part of this whole piece. And then when you do the pictures, you're going to take your time. You're going to make sure that you're not just taking average pictures, that you're taking very, very special pictures. How do you know they're that special? Because back when you create the booking, You're not going to do it by email, ever. You're not even going to do it by phone. You can start it by phone, but you want to meet her. At a minimum, do a Zoom call in today's world, but preferably you want to meet her. You want to be able to sit down and you want to talk to her, get to know her a little bit. Get a sense of what she really likes. Get a sense of her significant other. What do they like as a couple? What's important to them? That helps inform the location that you're going to shoot at or the colors that you're going to use. By meeting her, preferably at her home, you can also make sure that you understand where these pictures are going to go. Do they have a room picked out? Is it going to be in their bedroom? Maybe it's going to be in the living room, okay? How is that room decorated? What are the colors? Are they looking for a really big print or just a so-so print? Whichever. All of that is things that customers should be thinking about, but they don't always think about. By having those conversations with them and talking to them, you're actually selling them without trying to sell them something because you're informing them. You're making them a collaborator in this process. Don't treat your subjects, your clients, like an object. Photographers use the word subject interchangeably as if it was an object. People aren't objects. Subjects aren't customers. Build relationships. That's where the value comes from, right? After you've taken the pictures, have a reveal. Meet with them. You can put the images on a computer screen, whatever, not on the internet, at least not to show them the first time. Meet with them, show them the images, talk about the images, talk about how much fun it was, make suggestions, tell them why you like one over another, listen to what they have to say, answer their questions, etc. You will sell more and bigger prints, right? So the biggest step is getting away from digital sales and not interacting with your clients. You've got to invest time in your clients, building relationships. Because listen, those maternity shoots, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, could be a second or a third maternity shoot from the same person, or it could be family portraits, right? Photographers tend to be very short-sighted. It's like, oh, I've got a gig, I'm going to shoot a maternity shoot. It's like, boom, here's your pictures, bye, see ya. No, build relationships. And those people will be customers for life. They'll be coming back to you for life. That's what you want. You want them to be repeat customers. Okay? All right. Hopefully that helps. And we could talk more about that, but I'll need to know a little bit more about what you're doing and how you're doing it, that kind of stuff. Faustian Man made a comment here. People pay for the brand, not the goods. Tactile experience over digital. That's why NFTs failed. Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention, Faustian Man, that, you know, NFTs, you were paying money for something that you kind of didn't really own, but kind of did own. Like, yeah, NFTs. So glad I didn't go down that route. I watched a lot of photographers invest a lot of time and effort and energy into NFTs, and some made a little bit of money, so good for them, right? But yeah, so glad I didn't go down that route. Joe's Photography. Did you miss the DIY section? You did not. I skipped it tonight intentionally. Again, some of the changes that I put into play, which maybe you guys noticed, maybe you didn't, but I simply ran out of time. Don't worry. It'll be back next week. In fact, nobody called me on it. I promised you last week that I was going to share information about a set of plugins that I've been using for my retouching in Photoshop. I'm not going to have time this week. Don't worry. I promise I will show you all of that next week. And Joe, Neo does not do generative fill yet. I'm sure everybody will, but don't get overly excited about generative fill. Like, I worry. Joe, I know you. He's part of my Todd Knowledge community, so I got to be tough on you, right? Generative fill is cool. Generative fill will save our butts from time to time, but you know what? When I hear a photographer like, oh my God, yeah, I got to have that generative fill stuff, that says to me, that's a photographer that's not paying attention in camera, right? So yes, it's nice to have a tool that's going to save our butt when we screw up, but don't make screwing up normal or okay. The stuff that generative fill does is stuff that we should always be getting right in camera. So if we're having to rely on generative fill a lot, then we are not doing things the right way, right? It's very cool. It's amazing how good it is, but it's still a computer doing the thinking and creating the visuals. It'll help you sometimes and it'll let you down others. So you don't want to rely on it. Okay. Andre, would you make a last frame on the hows and whys on post-processing images? Honestly, Andre, I teach a bunch of classes on that I do online. Here's what I will do for you, since I'm out of time and I'm going to sign off momentarily. In the comments below the video, if you'll take a few moments and give me some specific aspects of post-processing that you're struggling with and you would like some help in, I will try to build in some short tutorials for that. For me to do kind of a start to finish nuts and bolts all about post-processing would actually take a couple of hours, and the last frame's only an hour long, and we've got other stuff to cover too. But if you tell me some specific things you're dealing with, kind of just like I did the little piece with Neo tonight, I'll gladly do some little, section by section pieces with post-processing. So the more information you give me, the better. Even let me know what software you're using, that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. And then Charlie, thanks for the advice. Yeah, very ironic that you just talked about how we don't print enough. Yeah. And I mean, it is true, unfortunately. We're all guilty. So in that sense, I can't really give you a really hard time about that, Charlie, but it makes a difference. And there's something about having that tangible print, when you walk into my house downstairs, there are 9 20 by 24 framed prints from around the world that run down a long wall when you come into the house. These images are 12 or 13 years old now. I'm bored to tears with them all. But, they're very special for my wife because they're vacations that we went on, their travels that we did. But indeed, every time somebody walks into the house, they comment on the pictures. Myself, seeing them, as much as I'm bored with the image as a photographer, they bring back nice memories, right? We don't get that from our phone every day. We don't get that from our computers. So there is a lot of value to having the prints. For the people that worry that we're going to lose all of our pictures because they're on hard drives, I don't buy into that. That's not why I'm saying we should print. I'm not saying you should print every single picture, but I do feel that there's a lot of value in making prints and framing them, hanging them up, something to be proud of. Okay. All right, gang. Shocker, I'm over time. Next week, I promise, DIY is back. I will show you those Photoshop plugins that I'm using for my retouching. We will have another shoot breakdown, and of course, the last frame Q&A. If you can't make it to the show live, just like I asked Andre to do, leave your question in the comments below the video. I will answer it next week. And hey, look, if you still need to do so, please do me a favor. Thumbs up helps more photographers find out about the show. Last but not least, remember, you don't get back the days that you waste. So please, go pick up that camera and shoot something. Because your best shot, it's your next shot. # do the work. Adios, gang.